Ever since I had this video idea in mind, I've been trying to ask people what this thing is. I did this by just going into Pavlov VR and, well, asking people. Moral gray zone, I have a question. What do you personally call these? The problem here is that nobody ever gave me a good answer. I think it was partially because some of them were mute. Yeah, that's... I don't know ASL. And also the fact that some of them were 14 years old and wanted to kill me. Murder? And also maybe the fact that people actually know what this is, because in a game with firearms and having to know about firearms, you probably know about firearms.
I really want to break from the ads now.
I really want to break from the ads now. But when I found this PNG image for the thumbnail, I got my word. Clip. Because this is not a clip. It's technically a magazine. But hey, if this mistake is so common that it's made its way onto the official stats for weapons in Team Fortress 2, one of the most popular shooter games to ever exist, there has to be a way in which saying clip in place of magazine is supernatural. Actually, no, I mean natural. There should be a way that saying clip in place of magazine is very natural. Supernatural, despite seeming to be a very straightforward word, refers to the things that are the opposite of natural. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We have to talk about the point of this video. Why you say things incorrectly, correctly. We will be talking about three main things in this video. How language evolves as a whole, how language evolves in small groups, and where the line is drawn between incorrect and correct. Now I would like to say this video is mainly about linguistic thought, but it's going to be somewhat shortened to the point. I want to explain why things are perceived as incorrect, and explain why they aren't incorrect along the way. So, with that in mind, let's get on to words in particular. Words change a lot. They change so often that over a few years a word can gain a completely new meaning, or it can be dissected and grafted onto other words. Take hardcore becoming something like cottagecore, for example. While I'd love to make a video on the evolution of words, I'm just going to point out the basics here. So let's talk about the internet. Words are always debated online for some reason. That reason being no actual reason. It's just because of our primal monkey urges and how we want to become monkey once more. But we can't go back to monkey without seeing how we got here in the first place. Supernatural, the word I was discussing before, has a weird history. And it's shockingly not the word itself. It's not because the word evolved in a weird way like the word literal, which became the opposite of literal in its original sense. Supernatural has always held its same meaning. Super means above, implying that things that are supernatural are above nature. However, this meaning has been tainted by the evolution of the individual word super. Super has become a synonym for very. If something is super ghostly, it doesn't mean the thing I'm describing is something above ghosts, just what that happened is extremely spooky. If you're super petty, you're not being modest, you're just a loser. This is why some words have become wrong in a correct sense. Super doesn't mean above anymore. This isn't a single event either. I mentioned that literal is also in the same boat. If something is literally stupid, it's not just stupid in a metaphorical way, it's just dumb. But look, there's like one guy watching this that's probably saying something like, well, I guess they've changed a bit, but it's obvious literal is still used to talk about books, and the change in the word super isn't even that big. So you're saying that saying clip in place of mag is just bad grammar, right? Well, then why in God's name do you think that saying clip here is a femboy? Wait, what? You say, the person I made up in my mind, I can yell that thing that they say in them animes when they win. Because the word bad is completely unrecognizable compared to its original meaning. Bad used to be a term to refer to effeminate men. If you were to look at this guy in the year 1000 and say bad, a guy would say, yep, that's the definition, but he'd say it in Old English. And nowadays, if you say he's bad, you'll be ratioed on Twitter. Another Pavlov VR clip I have here explains this pretty well. The point of view being a dictionary, this knife being a ratio, and this poor sap being Representative Clay Higgins' Twitter account.
Richard Nixon, ratio!
Yes, I was doing a Richard Nixon voice here, and I've been doing that pretty much every time I play Pavlov VR for some reason. But that's aside the point. If you want to see a video of me doing VR stuff, then tell me in the comment, just kidding, too bad, I'm going to make one anyways. Either way, it's quite obvious that saying that Astolfo here is bad would be perceived as an opinion, because calling him feminine is an observation, even though that would be a literal fact back in the day. This brings me on to another thing. Words may also evolve in compact phrases. Many people say, I could care less, when they want to talk about how little they care. However, the phrase used to be, I couldn't care less, with the negation, which makes a lot more sense. But saying this isn't wrong for one simple reason. This is just how languages work. In French even, the word pas means step, but it is now the proper way to negate verbs in the language. Saying don't speak a step is proper French, ne parle pas. Every language will have things that are just incorrect in a correct sense. And while I could end the video here, there are definitely times when things are wrong. And we also have to talk about why the way we speak ain't a way in which you're saying things wrong. I'd consider myself a linguist, but some people think that means I'm like an English teacher, always correcting people's grammar and the way they say things, but I don't. Linguists describe things, they don't try to fix things. However, whenever I meet a bad English teacher, it seems their goal is to correct people in the way that they speak, even though it's a right way of speaking. Accents are something seen as incorrect that are completely correct. I would have liked to talk about AAVE, considering it's probably the most discriminated against accent that has ever existed, at least in English, but the main reason I'm not is because I'm whiter than a ghost. If you want to see good videos on AAVE, African American Vernacular English, please look up some videos on it. However, AAVE is in fact related to something that I am familiar with, the Midwest. The Midwestern accent is seen as pretty neutral. We pretty much pronounce every letter we have in our words. But the thing to note is that in Iowa, where I was born, the Midwestern accent may seem a bit more southern, especially when spoken from people who come from areas with lower income. There are two primary things to consider in accents: new words and pronunciation. So when it comes to words, ain't is certainly the most word ever. Ain't is certainly the most hated word ever. People are so incessant about it. They say it just isn't a word. Then why, I ask you, does it exist? Ain't is a contraction that evolved from ammon, as in am not. But that's a mouthful to say, so eventually it became ant, and then because people love to change their vowels in English, watch my video on the printing press for more info, it became ain't. Some of the earliest recorded use of the word ain't comes from the year 1809. This word came into existence 20 years after George Washington was elected president. If the word normalcy can be used incorrectly by a president, but ain't isn't considered a word even though it's existed for as long as the presidency has, that's just strange. Another thing that can be seen in the Midwestern accent is double negatives. If you don't have none, it should imply that you do have some, and this is true, at least in the standard American accent. But if you think this is undisputable fact on how language works, then you're ignoring a bunch of them. Saying no tienes nada is literally you don't have none in Spanish, a language spoken by about 600 million people, a little over 7% of the population of the Earth. And saying that is correct. If you were to say no tienes algo, which means you don't have anything, that's incorrect. This is similar for other Romance languages like French, a language that is rapidly growing in Africa. Double negation is not a rarity in other European languages. So to see it in an American accent is no surprise, and it definitely isn't wrong. Now, when it comes to pronunciation, you might have some things to say about how people might say a rarer word, but the simplest way to argue this is to talk about the Brits.
That is the result of His Majesty's government.
Honk if Thatcher's deed.
British people could be considered to speak English in one of the most common ways. After all, English comes from the British Isles. But they pronounce the word for a specific metal as aluminium. We say aluminum, not aluminium. If you, as an American, would start saying aluminium in place of aluminum, you'd probably just start confusing people. This isn't wrong for either parties. Both words evolved from Latin. It's just that some scientists wrote the element names a bit differently when it was discovered. They're the same word, it's just that one group chose to pronounce it one way, and the other, the other. The biggest reason we perceived accents as wrong is due to one thing: class. If a person who is different than you says something differently, you have to explain why you're right and they're stupid and dumb and wrong. As I said, this video is linguistically oriented, but I can tell you basic facts about the brain like that. Talk to a psychologist for the deeper secrets of the brain. Finally, what is actually wrong? We discussed earlier that words and accents do not contribute to things being wrong. Words are constantly evolving, to the point where a slur against effeminate men became a word completely detached from that meaning. And accents, having different pronunciation and grammar rules, is just how language works. So when are things wrong? This is a gorphobolaxics. No, it's not. It definitely isn't. No, that's not true. There, that's when things are wrong. You, a speaker of English, have seen me call this little beast a gorphobolaxics, when you personally would call it something like a dog, hound, mutt, or otherwise. There's a basic rule in the study of language. A group of people have to perceive something as being correct for it to be correct. I can't say eat food because no English dialect says things that way, at least to my knowledge. And I can't pronounce this word as et, because again, nobody pronounces it that way. The reason we say things incorrectly, is because we are groups of people. And the way we communicate is always correct. as long as we can understand each other. So, if a bunch of people decided to call this thing a Gorphabalaxix, that right there would not be Psy-goggling.
Say a carpenter has done a real poor job, and then you say, that's all Psy-goggling, you know, he didn't have his walls straight, or...
They stand back and look, if something like they say, that thing's Psy-goggling.
Thank you for watching my video. I might be able to get one more video out this month, but I'm not going to be making any videos in April. My next video will be on the Cyrillic alphabet and how it works. Everybody's been talking about Russia and Ukraine right now, so it has brought my interest back to both their languages. And if people are going to wonder how the Cyrillic alphabet works at any time during this year, it's probably going to be right now. So I'll see you guys in the next video late in March or in May.